the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Welcome to another one of my ride-along videos. This is the Croom Challenge. This was held in Brooksville, Florida on February 9th. And this is a ride I have not done in probably over 10 years. This is not a race. It is a supported ride in that there are sag stops along the way. There's a 35-mile option and a 50-mile option. I decided to do the 50. The cool thing about this ride is it is all single track. There's no double track. There's no pavement. It is all single track trail, and it's a trail that's pretty unique for Florida. It's different than a lot of other Florida trails in that it's not as tight and twisty. There are a lot of rolling hills, not too technical. There are some technical sections. This is a section that they did some controlled burning, and I thought it made for a really cool looking scene. A lot of the land here is longleaf pine, and this is in the Withlacoochee State Forest. It's particularly known as the Croom Wildlife Management Area, and there are a ton of trails in here. So there are 64 miles of mountain bike trails in here. There are 31 miles of hiking trails and 43 miles of horseback riding trails. Here's a little area that just had some ups and downs. You could bypass this if you wanted to. It had a sign, hard or easy. If you were a beginner rider and just didn't want to do any of these rolling hills, you could skip that section. Back onto the rolling single track. And like I was saying earlier, the single track here is not as tight and twisty as other Florida single track, and you could get some really good speed going. It's hard to tell on the GoPro, but a lot of this is just rolling hills, and it gets more into rolling hills as you get further into the ride. And you could go 15, 16, 17 miles an hour on some of these sections. This area, like I said, it's longleaf pine, so there is sand on this course, but it's very manageable sand. It doesn't really slow you down. You do have to be a little cautious in the corners on this trail, but it's not that deep sand that just slows your wheels down. Because it's mixed a lot with pine straw, it makes it more manageable. So like I was saying earlier, this is not a race, but I like to do rides like this pretty fast. I made sure I got out pretty quickly. Because it's not a race, there's no set start time. There was a riders meeting at like 7:55 in the morning, and then the ride officially started at 8. There were some people that got out a little bit earlier, but most people started after the riders meeting. And here's a section that you're kind of getting out of the longleaf pine area, getting into more densely covered trees. I don't ride this area very often, but it's probably one that I would not want to ride in the middle of the day in the summer because there's not a ton of tree cover. Other areas that I ride in Florida have more tree cover. Okay, we're coming up to the first rest stop, and you saw signs there that said moonshine, and I thought it was kind of a joke, but you'll hear in a minute, they really had shots of moonshine at this rest stop. Good. What's up? Good morning. Moonshine? No moonshine right now.
Okay. We'll have a snack.
So you know you're in the backwoods of Florida at a mountain bike event when they have shots of moonshine at the rest stop. So like I said, that was the first rest stop. And I love doing these supported rides because I only carried one water bottle. I did carry my own food. I'm pretty particular about what I eat. Here's a nice little fun rolling section. We're coming up close to Drunken Munkey, and Drunken Munkey is about a 2.5 mile section that you may have seen in some of my other videos. It's a really cool section. Lots of jumps. My son loves riding Drunken Munkey. You can get some pretty good air time. But back to what I was saying about food. I usually carry now peanut butter and honey sandwiches. I used to do a lot of Cliff Bars, but they started to mess with my blood sugar. So peanut butter and honey, it's a little messy, but it does work. Okay, this is the start of Drunken Munkey. And I didn't record the whole thing, but like I said, it's 2.5 miles of jumps and berms and totally, steep climbs and descents. The guys who maintain this trail do an excellent job. Sometimes Florida can be hard to work with because of all the rain we get in the summertime. You can get a lot of erosion. These guys make sure they close the trails when they're wet to maintain them, but I think there's guys that get out here almost every day to do trail maintenance. They have an Instagram feed, and you can kind of get on that and see what they're doing. They actually had a session day going on. I saw it on Instagram. It wasn't really affected by this ride because the section they were sessioning was not on the course, but you'll see the group of the guys coming up. They were out there blowing off the trails with a leaf blower, so they just, I mean, they do a great job. There's the crew there getting ready to do some sessioning for the day. And like I said, this is a super fun section. You could bypass that right at the beginning. They called it the wormhole. If you wanted to skip this, you could take a left there. If you wanted to do Drunken Munkey, just take the right and do it. Obviously, it cut off some of the ride, but I think most of the people that were doing the ride did this section. This was in the 35 and the 50-mile section, so you got to do Drunken Munkey for either section of the ride. So this is, I think this is the funnest part of the whole course. It's kind of a, you drop into this gorge and there are jumps along the way. I was on my cross-country bike. I normally ride my trail bike on this section. I did not want to ride my trail bike for this event. That's it. It's just so fun. They got a steep climb out. So yeah, back to the bike I was using. I'm on my Niner RKT9 RDO with my Stans Valor wheels. Every time I get back on that bike, I just can't believe how fast it is. I've been riding my trail bike for a couple weeks and got back on this bike the day before this event just to get everything tuned up. And I'm telling you, this bike flies. I love cross-country full suspension bikes. I love railing single track like this. I did actually increase the air pressure in the shock the night before. I put it what I thought was about 25 or 20%, 25% sag. I normally run about 30 to 35% sag on this bike, but I added some air pressure and kind of regretted it. It was a little too firm for me. I knew that this trail was going to be pretty tame. There's not a lot of rocks and roots on this trail, but I wish I had not done that because, like I said, it was a little too firm. That bike, when you set it about 30 to 35% sag, it's just so smooth, even with 90 millimeters of travel. So along the trail, there were just these fun rolling sections. This was a great section. This kind of reminded me of Pinhoti 2 up in Georgia. It was just a trail with a drop off on one side, just rolling. Like I said, a lot of fun. As we got more into the ride, the ride got more hilly and got more into these sections. After Drunken Munkey is when you start to hit more of this more technical in terms of just ups and downs. So I want to go back to talking about the food that I was eating. So I also took Endurolites during this ride. I did not ride this event really hard, but I just kept it pretty steady the whole event. I felt remarkably good at the end of the ride, especially after doing 50 miles on single track. But I do, like I said, peanut butter and honey and Endurolites. I eat probably about every half hour on rides like this. But what I love about events like this is you can, ride them at your own pace. A little mailbox there on the right. The trail builders have a lot of fun on these trails. There are a lot of little things like that along the trail that were pretty humorous. I think one of the signs here before one of the steep climbs said, "Pull up your panties and pedal." Anyway, so like I said, I like these rides where there's not the pressure of racing, so you can just relax. You're always excited about doing an event like this, but there's not the nervous butterflies that you get for a race, which is kind of nice to get a break from. Most of my racing is in the fall for cyclocross and some mountain bike cross country. And then after the race season, starting in about January, is when I focus on more endurance stuff. So rides like this, and then doing gravel events or just long gravel rides. So like I was saying earlier, with the ride being fully supported, it was nice to just carry one water bottle. And by the way, the weather on this ride was absolutely perfect. It was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit at the start, and about 70 degrees, maybe a little bit higher, about 73 at the end, and totally sunny skies. I mean, some of these events, you just never know what you're going to get with weather. You have to sign up a couple months out, but we just hit it so good for the weather for this weekend. This is a climb. This is called Heartbreak Hill, and it was pretty steep. I got probably the last part of it, and so obviously we're getting into the more rolling hills of this ride, and there's another climb coming after this called, I think it was called Bootlegger Hill. So they were probably the longest climbs of the whole event. It's Florida, so they're not going to be that long, but I love climbing, and I was hoping those climbs would go for about 30 minutes, but I was back to reality that we're riding in Florida. Those kind of climbs come up in events I do up in Georgia and North Carolina, but the single track in Florida is really unique. If you ever get a chance to come down, this is Bootlegger Hill. If you ever get a chance to come down and ride some of these trails, there are some really good trailheads, and if you make it down, hit me up and I'll let you know where to ride. A little downhill here. This is probably the tightest, twistiest section of this whole course. So a lot of variety on this ride. Variety in the topography, variety in the, the trees and the type of terrain. So this is a great event. The staff did a really good job supporting this event. The sag stops, by the way, were at mile about 12 or 12 and a half. The next one, which we're going to come up to in a minute, was at 25, and the last one was at 39 miles. And they had, like bananas and pretzels and sandwiches and moonshine and beer at the last one, and of course water and heat. So I mainly just took advantage of the water and the peanut butter pretzels, which I love. I love having something salty after eating sweet things. So now we're coming up to the second rest stop, and like I said, this one's at the 25-mile mark, so we're halfway on the ride. And the staff did an excellent job with this, and they let these guys out of prison to come up and support the ride. I'm kidding. They were just dressed up like that. They had bars, if you saw those in the video, so you had to reach through the bars and get your heat and water and peanut butter pretzels. Like I was saying earlier, you could do this event at whatever speed you wanted to, and what I love about events like this is just the variety of people that come out and do them. You've got weekend warriors who ride once or twice a week. You've got guys like me that ride 5 or 6 days a week. You've got families doing these kind of events. You've got people who, this is like something that they would actually train for and look forward to, and just like people may train for a marathon. I'm sure you have people who target these events. Maybe they're just doing the 35, but I love the way mountain biking brings people together of all different skill level and variety. We're all out here just enjoying the woods, enjoying being on bikes. And another unique thing about this area, here's a little kind of tree stub that someone turned into a little display there. I thought that was pretty funny. And there was a sign there, I don't know if you saw it, it said ice cold beer next exit. So like I said, these guys have a lot of fun building these trails. This is an area, I think this was called Sugar Mountain. This is coming down it, just the last part of it. So there are mountains in Florida, and that's proof of it, Sugar Mountain. Just a, kind of a climb, switch back, and then switch back descent. So back to what I was saying that's unique about this area is how remote you are. Croom Wildlife Management Area is 20,000 acres, and so you're just out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, we're coming up to the split, so all these signs are telling you to go left for the 50 and right for the 35. And coming up here, I'm going to be rolling up to the last rest stop, which was at 39 miles. And they had beer at this rest stop if you wanted some. And I actually borrowed a shock pump from someone here and lowered the pressure in my shock because, like I said, it was just a little bit too firm. And I like running that RKT9 about 30 to 35% sag.
Here, man, almost done.
All right.
All right, now leaving the last rest stop, 11 miles to go from here, And like I said earlier, I'm feeling really good at this point. Kind of asking myself, maybe I could have pushed a little bit harder. But my total ride time at the end of this was 3 hours and 56 minutes. My Garmin said 48 miles, but someone with a wheel sensor said they had 52. So around 50 miles, give or take. A few other quick facts about this area. There are sections of Croom Wildlife Management Area that are also used for motorcycling, ATVs, Jeeps, and the Withlacoochee River runs through it. And the Withlacoochee is a really good canoeing, kayaking river that I have not done yet. I also love kayaking. I just don't do near as much as I'd like to because of time. I spend most of my time on bikes for my recreational activity, but I love kayaking. This is a cool section. There were some fast sections on this last part. So like I said, we're almost done with the ride, but coming through some more densely covered woods. This is just a slight descent that you could get up to about 16, 17 miles an hour. And at this point, you're starting to pass some of the people that were doing the 35 because the trails came back together. And so a lot of people that do the 35 don't do it as fast as some of us who do the 50. But just kind of ripping through the trail here. Like I was saying earlier, there's some sand, but it was really manageable. And I would imagine the sand makes this trail much better in the summer when you get a lot of rain. It just absorbs that water so the trails don't have a lot of standing water. Coming up to some folks here, these are some local racers, some pretty fast people. In fact, I passed these guys, and then that guy, I guess, decided to pick it up and stay on my wheel and pass me right at the very end. I guess he asked permission from the girl he was riding with. At least I hope he did. Like I said, he's a very fast local racer. All right, we're coming up to the end of the ride. Thanks for hanging with me, and I'll catch you in the next video.
The hairball is the sweetest